So, first of all, hello and welcome. Good evening from Bahrain. I would like to welcome you all and thank you for your participation with us in our first virtual online forum discussing educational excellence sustainability. Myself, Asra Al-Ba'id, I'm the Executive Director for Quality Assurance and Accreditation. I would like to thank you very much for your participation with us today and for our first online virtual forum, which will be tackling higher education practices during COVID-19. I would like to take this opportunity and welcome every individual one of you. I would like to welcome the host, Professor Abdullah Al-Hawaj, the founding president and the chairman of the Board of Trustees at Ahliauniversity, Professor Mansour Al-Ali, the president of Ahliauniversity, and also our speakers, Professor George Rodolphus, the dean of Leeds Business School at Leeds University, Dr. Anastasia Costapolo, the Associate Dean for Learning and Teaching at Hull University, Professor Alam Ahmed, the World Association President for Sustainable Development, Dr. Ashwin Fernandez, Research Director at QS Ranking, Dr.
Dr. Isra, I think if we can ask everybody to put their mic off, and you mic so clear because I can't hear any noises. Best if everybody switches their mics off so that when the person who's speaking comes across very clearly, please. If you don't, thank you. I think if we can ask everybody to put their mic off. And you don't make it so clear because I can't hear any noises. Best if everybody switches their mics off so that when the person who's speaking comes across very clearly, please. Thank you. I think their mics off so that when the person who's speaking thank you.
Isra, you are muted. We can't hear you. And I think it's Dr. Abdullah's phone is on, needs to be muted. You are still muted, Isra.
Dr. Abdullah is online. He's okay. His camera is off.
I'm back. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so Dr. Nina Abdelazak, the Consultant Advisor, Academic Affairs, Education and Training Quality Authority, Bahrain. Ms. Asmat Jafar, the Director of National Framework Operation Education and Training Quality Authority, Bahrain. Ms. Inji Megrian, Senior University Registrar, Lebanese American University. Ms. Ihsan Zakri, Manager of Accreditation Europe, the Middle East and Africa at AACSB International. And Ms. Samantha Miles, Head of Learning Knowledge E, UAE. So I would like to thank you again and start the session by giving 5 minutes for the host to enlighten us about the importance of this forum, as well as to raise questions that this forum will be addressing that will support us as higher education and higher education leaders, regulatory authority, quality assurance authority, and policy makers to consider in our future strategy. And now I would like to invite Professor Abdullah to start with his speech considering HEI's status and future strategies. Professor Abdullah, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me? I don't know because I keep seeing my picture going and coming. Am I on?
We can hear you very well.
Okay.
But we cannot see your picture.
It's strange because the camera is on, you know, so do I have to? It's very strange. You know.
Now we can see your picture.
Okay. First of all, of course, good evening for everybody. And I would like to take this. Did it disappear?
No, Dr. Abdullah, you put the camera back to front. Yeah, that's it. Keep it like that. You're okay now. You're okay now. Please go ahead. You're okay now.
Yeah. Okay. Then okay. You see me, but I don't see myself. That's okay. Yeah. First of all, of course, I would like to thank everybody who is joining this very important event. I would like to thank Isra also for organizing this very, very important event. I would like to thank everybody who joined, whether it's quality assurance, different universities, higher education councils, and I could see people from AACSP and all around the world. And this is really, it pleased me because I think we are at a very important time where there is a great changes going to happen in education. You know, with this unfortunate pandemic, although it's unfortunate and it is really very bad, but sometimes we could learn from difficult times. I think, you know, that we need really a change in the delivery of education. We need to update all our teachings. It's been probably very successful for the last maybe 200 years, the classical face-to-face and with all the other things. But I think technology, we invested a lot of money in technology. We invested a lot of money in ICT, you know. So it's time now to fulfill some of the requirements. There's many requirements where they say the number of universities or the number of places in universities are not enough to teach everybody, and that we need really to teach people who are so far, who cannot avoid, poor people and all that. So I think now, when this unfortunate pandemic happened, and now we are in the process of really thinking seriously about the next step after the pandemic, because I believe that teaching or education after Corona, it won't be the same before Corona. So how it's going to be, this is very important. Who could really influence how it's going to be? It's the educators, all of us, whether we are on the board, where we do put the legislation, or where we approve rules and regulation, where we put all these. So it's really time that everybody work together to describe or define the new outcome. There will be a new body to come. How much online teaching in it, how much face-to-face teaching in it, how we are going also to fulfill the requirement health-wise, I think it's going to take little time. And then, do we learn from what happened? If today it's Corona, what's going to be tomorrow or after 3 years? I think a lesson we've learned, one very important lesson also, which we should learn, we should work together with only one reason. We should all learn for a better world. We should all learn for better days. And this can only happen if we complement each other, support each other, help each other, and even politically. So I'm talking about what happened. What do we hear between the United States of America and China? What's the role of others? But in education, which is the most important thing, we saw during all this, there is only 2 or 3 things which is very important during all the pandemic. Food, maybe the air, and education. There's nothing else. So I think the future is to invest in proper education. So the future that boards and directors should be involved to make sure that the new legislations in the future will take care of the next step rather than being reactive to what happened. Let's be proactive. Let us work together to define the new future, because there is a new birth and we want to know how this will be look like, how big, how smart, how he looks like. So I think it's very, very important that we work together. It's very, very important that we learn from each other and we do not pass through the mistakes of others. We should learn from it and jump on it. So I think, you know, I take this opportunity talking to this great number of educators and to listen to their experience and what happened. But I think it's time that we all agree we should not compete the way which doesn't put us one step ahead. We should work together and complement each other and have one goal, that we do education or we invest in education for a better world, for a better life. And this is my message. So I hope that I didn't take a lot of your time. I am very, very eager to listen to all of you. And then if there is time to answer a few questions, probably. So thank you very much. I thank really Ahliauniversity for giving us this opportunity. I thank Isra for organizing this very important meeting or conference or event. And I hope that we will be able to change things in the future, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Abdullah, for your words that always brings us an insight. And I would now leave the floor for Professor Mansour to share with us Ahliauniversity's practices during the COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Isra. Thank you very much, Professor Abdullah. I first of all want to use the opportunity to thank all of you, the panelists who have taken your time to join us in this, in my view, a very important forum for all of us. I want to start that Ahliya, like any other university, when we were hit by this pandemic, there was at the very first few days, there was confusion. And slowly we are heading towards maturity and digesting and understanding what is really going on. And we've learned a lot of lessons. We have done a lot of things, including setting up a special call center, a special chat line, a special web page, how we dealt with the students, how we communicated, the students' well-being. So I have really, I want to move a bit more technical into the issues, because I believe then the floor is open and I've seen the other speakers, what their topics is about. So I will set the way forward. First of all, we must appreciate there was a shift, a move from face-to-face learning to technology-driven learning, and that has many implications. And that requires a lot of studying. There is a lot of research and study about that. Then, the next stage to think about, I think the technology-driven education will move to be more intelligent technology-driven education. And I think the field of AI in the future will play a role in this direction. Technology-driven education will not stay the same from today. It will change in time. And you will see, in my view, a lot of changes coming your way. My next point to mention is that the infrastructure of a traditional university, which has, as Professor Abdullah mentioned, for the last 300-400 years has been a certain way. The classroom, the setup, the yards, it's going to change. The whole infrastructure, the space, and the tools availability will change. The internet and technology change will change. The concept of infrastructure as we know it, we will see in the future that it will take a different shape. The next thing to consider is the issue of standards. The quality assurance agencies, the accreditation agencies, and the ranking agencies now have a task to reconsider their criteria, their indicators, their standards, and they will have to involve a bit more of the online teaching and learning and put new features and new criteria. And we will see that happening soon. And I think that is another issue. The next point I have got in front of me is the issue of budgeting and financing. Maybe the concept of employment and full-time lecturers and full-time staff will change. The budgeting and financing, in my view, may take a different shape in the future. Faculty employment allocation may change. The next part, I think, traditionally we are used to witnessing and watching our students in the classroom, in the corridors, the body language, the feeling, the counseling. That will take a different shape. We need to study now the student well-being and the faculty well-being and their mental health. You know, the concept of creating memories and friendships will take a different shape. We need to consider that. The counseling and advising face-to-face will change. We have to consider students with special needs. We have to see how we deal with them under this. And most importantly, in my view, the theory of academic behavior will develop and will change form. The pandemic has been, I think, a blessing in the making. I called it in a previous meeting, it's a newborn baby, which has only one choice: to grow. It will grow. My next point really to talk about is that all our policies at Ahliya, now we are realizing that all the policies where we assumed they will work, from the traditional to the online, we realize now many policies we have to revise. We have to revise the teaching environment, the teaching style, the course management, the assessments. All of these issues have to be really reconsidered and rethought, and we have to think of new ways. The concept of the role of the boards and strategy directions, it has to be revised and reassessed. The expected risks and the risks management is another issue. I think we are realizing there are new risks coming, which we never expected. My next point is really the issue of, you know, we are all used to the professor standing in the classroom. I think in the future, in my view, the course itself, the course design, will be an intelligent course design, where the professor himself will be virtual. And I expect the day, and I've been saying this for a couple of weeks now, I expect the day, not far from now, where the professor will be generated from the course, not the professor generates the course. So course design will take a lot of thinking. No.
I'm really sorry, Doctor. I will have to stop you there in order to maintain the time. I know the discussion is really active, but we have to carry on in order to give you know, a fair time distribution to the others.
I just want to say, Isra, the last sentence. Sure. If you allow me, just the last sentence. I think this forum about educational excellence, sustainability, we will obviously repeat it. Probably Isra will let you know. But I think the topic, each topic will be a research area in itself. So I want to thank you for hosting me, and the best of luck. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdullah and Professor Mansour. I'm not going to take any more time from the speakers because we would like to hear more about their experience and practices, and also gain more insights from the future actions and strategies that we need to consider. However, I would like just to emphasize on what has been mentioned so far, that there is a need to revisit our teaching and learning strategies, as well as focus on our future strategies and our priorities, and plan for it further. UNESCO actually stated that higher education are handling a new age of teaching and learning, and therefore they have developed a guideline for all education providers on how to tackle teaching and learning from a virtual point of view. However, the World Economic Forum declared that this is only a short-term solution, and there is a need to sustain these actions and consider it as part of all higher education and also education providers strategies. Therefore, we would like to know what is the higher education future strategies needs to be considered, and how it should be prioritized. So I will now leave the floor to our speakers, Professor George and Dr. Anastasia, on their joint presentation, and I will leave the floor to them. You have 8 minutes, and please enlighten us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of the Education Excellence and Sustainability Forum. As Esther said, I am Professor George Lodorkos from UK, from Leeds Beckett University, and our presentation is with Dr. Anastasia.
Dr. Anastasia Konstantopoulou, Associate Dean for Learning and Teaching in Edge Hill University. It's a pleasure and an honor to join such a esteemed company this evening.
The timing was perfect because we started working on a paper on organizational resilience and trying to identify the factors contributing to organizational resilience. So it was very timely. I will start with the context. Early in January 2020, we celebrated the new year with a clear plan for 2021. Our expectations were to have a higher number of international students, significant competition for undergraduate students due to a demographic dip of 18-year-olds in UK, an education strategy based on practice-relevant teaching, predominantly face-to-face, try to improve employability based more on engagement, or having a stronger engagement with employers. Student satisfaction improved by creating strong social identities and communities. And part of the USP of both our university was our locations, the campus, and the experience that we were offering to the students. So, well, within a couple of days, all these plans, all these assumptions were not relevant, as the professor said at the opening of today's forum. Our strategic plan and our student experience were completely out of sync with what we were expecting. So all this triggered the evolution of a new education paradigm and a new business model for running both business schools where I'm leading, but also universities wider, and the need for organizational resilience, which is what Anastasia would now introduce and have a discussion of what contributes to organizational resilience. Over to Anastasia.
Next slide, please. As you will, as George outlined, how do we define organizational resilience in such a broad context encompassing? Well, it's a mental, it's the combination of the mental and technical skills, the structures and the resources that we need to design, adapt, and implement positive behaviors. And I would like to emphasize the positivity in these difficult times. In response to forthcoming situations while enduring different levels of stress. And again, we need to be mindful that this pandemic came at a time that in UK universities were already under quite a bit of stress as organizations with CMA regulations, with increasing regulation, Office for Students oversight, etc. So it is about bouncing back. It is about growing from the crisis. It is about being able to endure different levels of stress, but with a positive behavior, with a positive outlook. So next slide, please. If we look here at the pyramid I've outlined. Then I'm mute. What we've got here, adapted from McManus's model, it's three components really that are key dimensions in an organization, in a higher education institution context. It's all about the leadership and the culture. Is about networking and relationship, both internal and external, and also very key is the ability for the university or the organization in general to adapt, to innovate, to be creative in a very difficult time, in order to bounce back from the external environment pressures. So within the context of maintaining and even improving student experience, while we need to pivot the whole provision of our courses and how we support our students, we have to think the planning in a very different way. We have to think training, both for staff and students. Don't assume all students can cope with the different tools and online teaching and learning in the same degree. We have to maintain staff engagement and morale, and all comes from the leadership and the culture of the organization. So we really need to build on the social capital. It is about network relationship within departments, learn what works, different subject disciplines, internal communications teams and structures, but also external. Let's not forget that universities need to work with as members of the society, with employers, with charity organizations and community as part of that enrichment of the student experience. How do we maintain that connectivity when all our delivery is pivoted to become online, blended, or something in between? At the same time, how do we minimize silo mentality and maximize social capital? We are used to go for a coffee or for some water to the water cooler discussions, very famously, and have an idea with a colleague and bounce back and come back and say, yeah, I can do this with my module, I can do this with my assessment. We no longer have this opportunity if we do everything online. What mechanisms can we employ that we still maintain these seeds of innovation, creativity that will help us keep growing, keep creating a transformative learning experience? And then is the multimodal approach. We needed to shift from face-to-face all the way to online. From next year, we're planning something between those two extremes and anything in between, depending how the pandemic evolves into an endemic, how government instructions and guidance change, the response of the students and the needs, both home students, international students, and is really planning in the land of the unknown. So all these things, how we react and how we build together all these ingredients and how successfully we blend them together, which the difference will be the answer will be different from each organization. It will not be the same for Edge Hill. It will not be the same for Bahrain. It will not be the same for Leeds Beckett or a university in the States, for example. And that's where is the challenge. How do you find the right balance between all these ingredients to make it work for your own organization? To make sure your organization is resilient, you maintain a transformative learning experience, taking into account the needs of staff and students as well, while maintaining everything else around infrastructure, financial sustainability, the branding, the reputation, the research that informs your teaching. All this should not also be forgotten. Thank you.
So we hope that we've got some time for questions.
So thank you very much, Dr. Anastasia and Professor George. I actually find your presentation very much interesting because it touched upon certain key point that we have been discussing as well, and we are facing it in real life, such as the positive behavior from both the students and faculty members, as well as the need of leadership and culture and the importance throughout the entire change and transformation of learning process. So we will leave the questions and answer at the end after all the speakers. So I will now invite the next speaker. Unfortunately, Professor Alam was not able to be online with us, so I will invite Dr. Ashwin Fernandez to take the floor. Dr. Ashwin?
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Isra. It's a pleasure to address all of you all. Thank you so much, Professor Abdallah, Dr. Mansoor, and all the panelists here today. So let me just share my screen while I get that running in a second. All right, so I think you can already see my screen, and I think the topic what we want to discuss today is sustainability in the long term. So what I have here is you've probably seen the news already, the impact of COVID-19 in the last 3 months. I don't need to talk about how it has disrupted our lives, and this is the first kind of a pandemic that has necessitated the need for social distancing. But with the kind of bad news, there also has been some silver linings, and you can see how universities are actually involved in finding innovative ways to support the fight for COVID-19. Let it be research, let it be innovative online teaching, and so on. So there is also some good things happening at the universities while the universities have closed for the last couple of months, and the future of universities to open in the next few months seems bleak, especially in a lot of parts in the West and in Asia as well. So I'm going to cover some strategies which I have picked up and QS has picked up to our own studies, and particularly what we're doing in South Asia at this time. So I'm going to look upon 3 strategies. One is the admission strategy, what has evolved from what it was previously into internationalization, and then cost of education. So when we're looking at the admission strategies, we've seen that compared to previous times, definitely many universities and colleges have been giving extended deadlines and relaxing the admission process to support those families which have been financially impacted. The entire admission process, and you've probably seen how COVID-19 has been a facilitator of technology use at universities, and that is exactly what has happened, is right from the admission test to enrollment to a visit to the institution, to the entire process is happening online, and universities are using that opportunity, how they can use perhaps even rankings and ratings to showcase to students what they're good at. And I can also add accreditation in that for that matter as well, because there are several key areas which I like to showcase to students while they are online. It includes facilities, employability, diversity, and so on. We've seen that universities have also waived application fees, and not just universities, but also entrance tests right now. We've seen how they have waived and extended that and given greater facilities to students, which is working at this time. We've seen also universities, colleges, and across the board institutions offer reduced entry requirements in a bid to attract international students. And I think that has worked because there might have been a criteria where a student meets all the requirements, but only does not have perhaps a language requirement. And that is the time universities are using now, how they can bring the students up to speed with the language. And definitely the flexible study options now with no one traveling. And I think even when travel opens up in the next 2 months and 3 months, if not the students, the parents will be worried of sending the awards abroad. So definitely providing a flexible online on your own target study approach would work and has been tested out. And most importantly, what we've seen is the increased faculty and alumni interaction with future students to increase the admission process, because now without actual campus visit, that's a way how you can increase the confidence of students willing to come on campus. And definitely personal communication. I mean, highlighting all those great things, branding, as the previous presenter also mentioned, is reaching out and communicating that clearly with potential students, using social media and whatever other mediums seems to work. So that's the admission process. Let's look at internationalization. I mean, there has always been a debate in rankings and with universities about rankings that, well, internationalization sometimes is perhaps needs to be relooked. But I think this is the right time. I mean, we've seen how mobility has completely stopped across the world. Students are perhaps not choosing at this time to go to a foreign country to study. Recruitment has stopped. There are various job losses at various points. But I think what is happening with the new internationalization is that there is increased flexibility where faculty members can go to a different university while still staying at home. You can attract the best faculty without having the need for them to travel. Improved research collaborations have happened at this time and will continue to happen. There is greater engagement across institutions in terms of sharing of technology, which has high cost, and that is perhaps for the medical faculty, where there is the simulators and the other the e-learning tools are so expensive that within the country we've seen collaboration on buying and sharing. And I think that's quite amazing to see that kind of things to happen even within the country when we've seen it previously across countries. And student interaction, where we've seen virtual student exchanges happening as well. So that is a great thing, because in our Asia ranking, we are looking at student exchange where students spend at least a semester abroad. But now with virtual student exchanges happening, and that's a great thing. And I'm sure ranking agencies, rating agencies, and perhaps even accreditation will perhaps look at this in the future. I think at the end of it, it is about improving the online experience. But while improving the online experience, what are the cost of education? And I think that has been a big debate worldwide on the cost of education during COVID-19, mixed opinions, and I think that's probably in Bahrain as well, whether should you cut fees, students are asking for that. And I think the justification is, while you don't have the maintenance of physical facilities, there is definitely a need to upgrade and offer better online facilities to your students, offering them a holistic university life. And I think perhaps Bahrain is, or perhaps some of the countries in the GCC have good connectivity, have great accessibility. How do you support and fund students in other places, in remote places where perhaps accessibility is a challenge, cost might be another concern, and same for faculty as well? Upgradation of laptops, the IT systems, bandwidth, and so on. So I think the debate will still continue, but there is a great need for where you can increase the number of students while keeping the cost low at the same time. I will get into a quick case study what we are doing in South Asia, particularly in India. We have established an office in India called QSI Gauge. What we wanted to study at this point in time is we did a study with about 7,000 plus college kids. And what we found out was that universities well, students were very apprehensive of travel abroad. Safety was a concern. We also found that universities need to continue their international engagements at this time because using virtual and remote collaborations. Also, transformation into blended teaching and learning for the future, because while this looks like the short term going online, how do you blend that with a physical classroom, brick and mortar facility in the future? Because students definitely, when we surveyed students across the world, everybody wants to get back into a classroom, and that's what is the beauty of a blended system. You can offer both, and perhaps as the world reopens, you can start with online and eventually move to a blended learning. Definitely for the need for faculty experts to collaborate virtually as well has been one of the things come out in the report. But interestingly, we also found out that there are several challenges of online education. I think that probably is true for many countries in the Arab region and North African region. And in this, we found a major majority of the students, and I think that also holds good everywhere, are still using mobile hotspots, are using the dongle internet, and availability of high-speed broadband in many countries is a big challenge. And there is a digital divide in emerging economies. So while you might have great accessibility in Bahrain, there is a challenge elsewhere. So there's a need for universities to support these students across different countries when they're having international students, because I think the new internationalization will enable universities to get students from anywhere in the world. There are various studies we conducted, and I think the way forward, what we recommended for universities is that there are 3 stages we believe in offering online education. One is, an emergency response teaching. Something happens, you stop classes and you move to online, which was March, I would believe. April, May, I think universities went to 100% online delivery, went into assessment, grading, and so on. The stage 3 was how do you transform higher education into making it a sustainable model for blended teaching and learning. So and accreditation, national accreditation for that matter, how does that fit into this? So in conclusion, everyone, I think improving the IT infrastructure in institutions, not just the software, the hardware, but also the knowledge and know-how, revisiting admission process, enabling a shift in the mindset towards online teaching and learning. And that has been a big challenge. People are not, or previously online teaching was considered subpar compared to classroom teaching. But that shift perhaps is even today in many countries. How do we move forward from there? Institutional collaborations, both international and also national, and we talked about cost saving in this case, sharing of best practices, and that's what we're doing today. And I think we've run several forums in the past as well. And robust training of faculty and students on EdTech tools has been, and I think it's perhaps not just the faculty, but also students. Some of the tools perhaps which we use require training and retraining. And I think we have some today, we have some people from the accreditation and quality assurance. How do we revisit the norms of validation and accreditation of online courses? I think that's one of the things we should look at in the future, and definitely not a knee-jerk reaction, but how can we be prepared for the future by having a robust system which is just not future ready, but also has blended in that at the moment and is ready to for any future pandemic or any future disaster where it would still continue as natural course when this happens. So this is the point I would like to make. I think that's within the time. Dr. Isra, thank you so much, everyone, and do connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, we can't do it today. We'll perhaps do it afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashwin. That was very interesting, and frankly speaking, you have touched upon several points that it is also part of our questions for the speakers. One of them is about the norms and validation of the online learning, especially for the quality assurance aspect, and how do we assure that the online learning is equivalent to the level that is expecting to assess the students, and not only the online learning as well as some ethical issues in terms of the assessment mechanisms in place. So definitely, we will be going through these in our questions with the speakers. I will now give the floor to Dr. Nina Abdelrazak from BQA. Thank you, Dr. Nina.
Okay, hello, thank you very much, Isra. I don't know, I'm gonna share my PowerPoint, and while I'm doing that, I would just like to thank Ahliya University for this opportunity. Of course, I thank Professor Hawaj, Professor Mansour, and you, Isra. I also thank my institution, the Bahrain Education and Training Quality Authority, for their support. I think, you know, we've heard wonderful presentations today, and I don't know, can you see my presentation now? Is it shared? Yes? Isra?
I cannot
I can see it.
yet.
I can see it. I can see it.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so what I did is, when I thought about what am I going to talk about today, I decided to take a slightly different approach. Instead of speaking like in general about like what are the big changes that have to happen maybe in the future if this, you know, COVID-19, God forbid, continues, or maybe if we find ourselves in a situation where, as Professor Hawaj mentioned, maybe having to start offering online programs and courses for some students. So I decided that because at the quality assurance, like when we are evaluating programs and also institutions, one of the main standards that we look at is basically the teaching and learning. And I said, well, okay, there are two factors here. The teaching, of course, the instructors, and the learning are the students. And we know that, like usually with the online teaching and learning environment, we usually say that it is very much, you know, a constructivist, student-centered environment. And yes, that is true. But in the end, also, we notice that maybe it depends a lot on what the instructor can do and how well they can do it in order to facilitate this kind of student-centeredness and basically the quality of the learning acquired. So I decided to focus more on the role of the instructor in the online environment and how that role changes once we make this shift from the face-to-face to the online environment. And basically, what I thought of is we noticed something maybe worldwide happening, a trend, which is what it is a very positive trend, I think, with the COVID-19 outbreak, that now with it came something positive in terms of the recognition and the acknowledgement of the value of instructors and teachers. As Professor Hawaj said, maybe now we were focusing mainly on the important things like food and air and education. And really what stood out is how much people started acknowledging and noticing the value of the instructor. So with this, basically, some questions came to my mind, like, okay, how do the higher education institutions now envision the role of the faculty member? How is it going to be if we move to full online environment? And also, like, is this vision that we have or the institutions have, is it comprehensive enough, and is it as stretched out as it should be? And what strategies do the institutions need to adopt in the future with respect to the faculty members' roles? So basically, some basics that I want to start with, of course, and this is maybe known everywhere now, and especially with those who were teaching online, that it's really maybe a bit more difficult to teach an online course in terms of planning and delivering the course and assessing, because it is way more time consuming than the face-to-face traditional classroom. And I think that this is really important, and it needs to be factored in by the higher education institutions. And this really brings us like maybe to the first future strategy that higher education needs to take into consideration or adopt. It should be basically the strategy of revisiting the faculty workload policies that they have. I think this is a very good starting point because you don't want to end up basically with faculty who are drained, because the quality of what they will deliver will be compromised, and this with it will compromise basically the quality of the learning. So now to come to the role of the instructor, when you basically do research, you notice it is what is known as a DTE role. And what we mean by DTE, it stands for design, teach, and engage. So basically, the online instructor has all of these main tasks or roles to take on. They need to be designing everything related to the course in terms of, content, learning materials, assessment, the rules and the regulations, the procedures in the course, etc. They need, of course, to deliver it and teach it. And with the teaching comes office hours and being there to support and scaffold the students' learning. And also, which I will be focusing on a lot today, is the engagement part. And what we mean by engagement is the ability of the instructor to basically implement themselves in a kind of community formation role. And we will talk about this more in the next slides. But basically, if you look at the main tasks that an instructor online has, they have technical roles or tasks, managerial tasks, pedagogical, and social. And the social role is the one that is attached to the engagement. So basically, when we look at the social role, in the research, you will notice, the international research, that sometimes there is a slight issue that is pinpointed, and a lot of the studies, they indicate that there is a need for greater and deeper social presence or involvement and engagement in the online courses, and this needs to come from the instructors' involvement and effort in the online environments. So basically, this means that we are not having enough social presence in terms of the community formation. Professor Mansour spoke about the memories and the friendships that maybe get lost in the online environment or may get lost. And here comes basically the important social role of the instructor to try to make maybe new forms of memories and friendships for the learners and basically for himself maybe with these learners or herself. So anyway, with the social role comes the creation of a harmonious online social environment. And this kind of environment usually is basically like it comes into reality with three things: active, meaningful participation, enhanced confidence, and a strong sense of belongingness. So it's very important that the students know that not only that they have to log in, okay, because they have to, but they need to know that when they log in, they are really meaningful contributors. They contribute to this environment and they are contributed to, and their contributions are appreciated, and their contributions really make a difference. And at the same time, they need to trust this environment and everyone in it. So it's very important that they do not feel threatened, to think out of the box, to be innovative, to be creative, to make mistakes. And this helps in building their confidence that it is okay because this is how I will learn in the end. And at the same time, they need to feel a sense of belongingness. They need to feel that they are really a part there, they are respected, they are welcome, there are rules and regulations that really manage the types of acceptable behaviors in the online environment, just like in any traditional environment. So basically, to come to the implications of all this, what we are saying is that if there is lack of or insufficient social presence in the online environment, this is going to lead to a problem. And the problem really is embodied in a sense of isolation. The learners and even the instructor will start feeling isolated in this virtual space, which already to begin with, it can be a very lonely space. And basically, if this happens, of course, it is going to have like negative repercussions on learners' motivation, and not only learners' motivation, but also the instructor's motivation, because no instructor, enjoys teaching a dead class or students who are unmotivated. It will also negatively impact the quality of the learning and the quality of the teaching. And really, this is something very, very serious. So from all of this, it means that there are, I think, two higher education future strategies that are needed. Strategy one the higher education institutions, they need to emphasize not only the social presence of the instructor as we see it now in many institutions, that you have to log on and teach your course, you have to do office hours. No, we need to have this extended definition, which I just explained, in terms of the belongingness, the confidence, the trust, the meaningful interactions, and the building of the sense of community. And at the same time, what the higher education institutions need to do is they need to raise awareness and they need to do training. As in the first presentation, when George and Anastasia, they mentioned how important it is to have the right type of training, because many times it is assumed that the instructors will know how to do this, and this is not true. And not everyone knows basically how to teach an online course to begin with, or how to design an online course to begin with, and let alone, adding to that this very important element of social presence. So training, adequate training, sufficient training in this respect is very much needed. And basically, I mean, that's my simple presentation with three main, I think, future higher education strategies that I could think of for something that's really important, because student-centeredness does not work without really the proper teacher or the proper instructor doing all of those roles that they have. So thank you very much. I just wanted to add a last slide where I put some further readings. These are my publications in educational technology, and in some of them I do talk about the role of the instructor. And that's it for me, so I hope I kept the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Nina. Honestly speaking, your presentation is very interesting. It just explains it all. There is a serious need for higher education, absolutely focus on staff training, faculty development, and you are absolutely right. There is always a need to continue the faculty development, to catch up with the different techniques of teaching and learning, and also have some interaction between the faculty and the student in different means. So absolutely, you have touched upon a very important point that we really believe in it as well. So thank you very much. I will now leave the floor for Ms. Asmat Jafar to talk about her presentation. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Isra. And I would like at the beginning to thank Ahliauniversity for inviting us for this forum. I'm going to share my presentation with you. Is it clear? Can you see it?
Yes, it is. I can see. We can see it. Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So while my colleagues concentrated or focused on the process of the online learning and the virtual learning, I'll be focusing on how the qualifications gained through blended or online or virtual learning are going to be recognized, and the role of qualifications framework in doing that. So to begin with, I'll just give you a brief about what are qualifications framework. The qualifications frameworks are tools to recognize the value of qualifications and according to their levels or the learning outcomes achieved. And this is the National Qualifications Framework of the Kingdom of Bahrain, which is managed by an Education and Training Quality Authority, VQA. It is an integrated framework which has 10 levels. It goes from level 1 to level 10. Level 1 being it's very simple qualifications like access and certificates, and the level 10 is the doctoral degree. The Qualification Framework NQF of Bahrain has the capacity to recognize all forms of learning, being it formal, non-formal, or informal learning, which includes the virtual and the online learning. It covers all sectors, being it higher education, vocational, and general education, and all the qualifications that go or sit on the NQF are usually quality assures the learning programs. If we look at international trends, we can see that more than 140 countries around the world are for reforming their qualification system through strengthening roles of qualifications framework. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDG number 4, calls for the focus on quality and inclusion of education and recognizing the lifelong learning and opportunities for all. Future jobs and new skills, recognition of prior learning and experience and certifications of skills gained through whatever mode is becoming very important, and where people nowadays are changing jobs very easily and they gain new skills on continuous basis. We need to recognize these skills, and this has become more important even during and after the pandemic. So the emphasis internationally is on promoting flexible learning pathways, both formal and informal settings, enabling learners to accumulate credits and then transfer for the level of achievement, validating and accreditation, as my colleague already talked about, validating and accreditation, not only of the formal learning, but of the prior learning and experience, the informal one, establishing appropriate bridging programs, and we should not forget the important role of career guidance and counseling in this. So what does this have or imply for higher education institutes? The rapid changes in communication and technology, the COVID-19 pandemic has drawn the attention for the importance of complementarity between the formal and non-formal education. And this makes us think that our education system needs to be more flexible, inclusive, and responsive, especially during crisis and emergency situation. Recently, actually it was in May last month, the European Commission has launched the first consultation group on supporting higher education institutes to offer micro-credentials, flexible and modular small learning courses. And micro-credentials are usually those certificates that the learners will gain for professional certain skills that they gain for short courses and specific skills that they gain and they get certified for. We hope that this crisis will move away, inshallah, in the future, sooner or later it will move away. And HEIs need to consider virtual and blended learning to be part of their education in the foreseeable future. And for this, the higher education institutes, oh, I think it's stuck. Hello? Oh. And for this, the institution's policies and the long-term framework in the higher education institute needs to go beyond the immediate action. They need to think about some long-term actions to be taken for this. I'll go for the next slide. Sorry, I think it's stuck somewhere.
We can hear you when we can hear you very well.
Okay, but the slide is not moving to.
Yeah, the slide is not moving. I think it's okay. Now it's moving. Yes.
Okay, so what is the role of qualifications framework in all of this? Qualifications framework recognize qualification whether they are gained inside or outside the formal setting, and which is not obliged with the place of learning. And they provide opportunities for learners to gain or obtain qualifications according to certain knowledge, skills, and competencies, and the complexity of learning outcomes. This process would provide equal opportunities for learners and will promote and enhance lifelong learning. However, it is important that it should be governed by quality assurance standards and based on transparent evaluation and assessment. And for all of this to be achieved, as Professor Hawaj mentioned at the beginning, we need to review our legislation. Here I'm talking about Bahrain specifically, and I think this applies to other countries as well. Together, we need to work and look at our legislation, review them. We need supportive policies, coordination among all relevant stakeholders, and specific arrangement for assessment within the HEIs to achieve all of that. And by this, I will end my presentation, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Asmat. Yeah, and honestly speaking, you have highlighted and touched upon a very important point, such as blended learning, which we are all aiming to have in the future. And also it is in line with the other speakers' calls as well, when they have mentioned things with regard to the exchange of the students and providing the opportunities for students in different means. Also, we do believe that blended learning will allow students to progress faster and give them the opportunity for different means of learning. I would also highlight and emphasize that Bahrain in particular have reacted with COVID-19 in a very quick manner, and this is because of a very solid quality assurance standards and mechanisms in place, which goes back to the Bahrain Quality Assurance Authority, as well as the regulatory standards set by the Higher Education Council. So we must thank you very much for developing a very solid basis that enabled the higher education institutes in Bahrain to catch up with this COVID-19 pandemic in a faster manner. I will now leave the floor to Ms. Annie to present her presentation with us. So Ms. Annie, the floor is yours. Miss Annie, if you can unmute the mic.
Okay, all right, Dr. Isra, please, can you share my presentation?
All right, sure.
Okay, in the meantime, let me thank Ahliauniversity for this opportunity to share my experience and contribution with such esteemed set of panelists. I am from Lebanon, and I'm going to represent the Lebanese American University, which is almost 100-year-old university in Lebanon. We have like 42,000 alumni, over 8,000 students, 7 schools, around 1,000 full-time faculty, and institutionally accredited by NECI, and we have several program accreditations. However, let me just right from the beginning say that, can you hear me?
Can you do what?
Hello, Isra, can you follow me?
We can hear you. We can hear you loud and clear.
All right. Okay.
I can hear you.
All right. Excellent. So, Isra, if we can have the first slide, please. My contribution is basically on, has a different perspective, because I'm going to focus more on the academic services, that we offer at the university, and therefore the unique experience of what we went through at our university. Okay, so can we move on to the first slide, please, Isra? If we can add a slideshow. Okay, so definitely, the question on everybody's mind nowadays is how to deal with this major disruptor. And I would like to, take it at 2 levels. One of them being, the leadership level, and the other one at the rest of the community. As you can see in the image, the leadership is strained and trying to grapple with so many different challenges. And the Lebanese are well known for encountering many sudden surprises and challenges. The image here also shows how suddenly our leadership had to be face to face with many different challenges, many unknowns and uncertainties. For instance, our leadership had to, first of all, understand and assess the scope and the level of threat. We had to see whether the university was ready to make the shift, the necessary shift in terms of online education, or even working remotely for the whole staff. This swift pivoting also was an imperative decision at the leadership level, which resulted in immediate mobilization. What was really the impact on the LAU community? If we can have the second slide, please, Isra. So the sudden confinement that we had to really undergo due to the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the way, just like everybody else, our faculty taught, how our students were learning, the disruption to their student life, how our staff had to work, so that the university's operation would really be running with minimal disruption. And as an example, I'd like to say, for example, like my team, the registrar's office, had to adapt to very new working environment and conditions. I had to work from home, or they had to deal with network problems. They had to deal with the issues and responsibilities related to the family, having to teach their children who were also doing their schooling online. So on top of all these, that at times people really felt either in a mode of panic, or at times you could really feel this sense of burnout. Because as somebody mentioned a while ago, probably before we went live, was that we really don't have a time schedule and office hours anymore. And that, everybody had to be available almost 24/7. So everybody was pulled apart in internal and external challenges. And from one day to another, everything changed. And let me add also that apart from the fear of this unknown pandemic, we in Lebanon, we also encountered or still encountering very dire economic conditions. And all of this really exacerbated the stress levels for our community. Physically, socially, mentally, we were all drained. But those who know the Lebanese understand that the added emotional duress we encountered due to social distancing was basically because we are so much of a touch culture. And therefore, it was really inconceivable for us to stay distant from each other, or missing our loved ones and not seeing each other or our colleagues. But we had to do it, and we did it. So the initial period in our context was that of lack of clarity and indecision, but it was immediately followed by reason and rational actions. So at the Lebanese American University, these are some of the things that we did. Next slide, please. We tried to, first of all, make sure that our IT infrastructure was in place to support the online teaching and learning process, as well as allowing us to benefit from the use of technology and work remotely. The university also offered intensive training programs for faculty who all of a sudden had to improvise and had to shift to online teaching, and therefore this transition needed continued support. One other important aspect was reviewing policies university rules and regulations and some important policies that paved the way for more flexibility and empathy, I would say. Flexibility particularly in the choice of selecting the pass, no pass grading system. Of course, this was all done with much attention and care, not to compromise the quality of education. So again, I'm referring to the academic services that are offered to the students. We really worked very hard as a team and we created innovative solutions. These solutions underpin our student-centeredness as a university. So we tried our best to provide clear and periodic communication to the community. We did our best to create more online services for students. In fact, in some areas, we even doubled, the number of online services to them. We also were there, all the time, especially for students. And again, anecdotally, just let me give you an example. In the past 2 months, in April and May, our team replied more than 4,000 student emails, and also responded to over 1,700 requests and petitions. So they were supported all the time. And in addition to, of course, all the courses that were now online, all the 2,000 courses on both campuses. Well, COVID-19 pandemic was a major disruptor, but it brought out also the best in people. Well, I would really say with all earnestness that the boundaries between the different offices and the departments really vanished. So everybody closed ranks, and there was this synergy that created a lot of collaboration, which was really formidable. And to be honest, as a director also, as the university registrar, I didn't imagine our teams could be so resilient. It was really an amazing experience, and we really became a community of learning. And what are some of the lessons learned, as we see in the last slide here, and what is the way forward? Well, it's no secret to everybody. We're all in this together. It's a new era, a new dawn, and change being the main constant here. Higher education institutions now will seek new ways to reinvent themselves based on evidence and experiences. Why do I say that? Because, our focus is always quality assurance standards and accreditation requirements. So strategic agility will be the new standard for higher education. And of course, we all have to opt for the skills and the creation of infrastructure that would help us be very ready. The level of readiness to be pivoting, to be improvising is of utmost importance. And there are very important questions that will have to be still discussed, honed, refined, like how do we provide more relevant faculty development to our community? How is it possible to effectively evaluate remote courses? And is it possible to ensure equity to our students and similar questions? And finally, we all need to keep our eyes on the ball, as they say. So what is it? It's education, excellence, sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Annie for your amazing presentation. You have touched upon about the compliance of the QA standards, and also this is going to, of course, we really have to, despite how much we are trying to catch up with the COVID-19 pandemic, we really should not neglect the quality of the service that we're providing as a higher education institutes. And this will leave us to also compliance with accreditation standards. So I will give the floor for Mr. Ahsan Zakri to highlight his presentation about WCSB requirements. So the floor is yours.
Can you see the screen as well?
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you so much. And first, I'm very happy to hear all the presentations that you're on, and we're getting all this information from different stakeholders when we are working on higher education institutions and for our students, for the faculty, for the learners. And this is what we've been living and experiencing. I mean, we are living this as an organization, but through this pandemic, all was condensed in the last 2 or 3 months of what is important and what do we need to highlight. So thank you so much. Just let's see if the slides are working. Yes. So just briefly to highlight where AACSB is, as you all know, a global organization over 140 years old. We have global offices. We are in over 103 countries worldwide. So office in Tampa, Florida, dealing with Canada, the US and South America, office in Amsterdam where I'm located for the Europe, Middle East and Africa, and we have office in Singapore for Asia Pacific. So as you could expect, we lived this pandemic first in stages when it started in the Asia Pacific, of course, and then that continued until it was the final hit, let's say in March, last March, how affected the work of all of us, of course, as an organization. We are over 90 employees in these offices. But we are also a member organization and a volunteer-driven organization. So all our volunteers got affected, all our members got affected, and that is the waves that started on until we reached a point that we need to address all these members. So just to give an idea, over 1,600 of educational members in the globe, as I said, over 103 countries. That needed to deal with, and one of a sudden AACSB is confronted with all these questions. So as a quality assurance organization, as the accreditation body, but also some immediate action that needed to be done because I'm having my visit on 12th of March or 15th of March for initial accreditation, for re-accreditation. So that got us to the agility of AACSB, of the staff, but also with the volunteers of how do we respond? How do we start working with this, assuring schools, moving visits? This is an investment from all these parties. These schools are ready for accreditation, invested financially, emotionally. What do we do? How do we address that and how do we work on it? So we needed very quickly to start working, and I really appreciate that what just got mentioned by Anya, but we are all in this together. So we are all part of this issue. So as I said, as an organization, we are affected, but of course our stakeholders and our members are. So the main thing that we started with is communication. We started communicating with all our members, providing updates. I never had as many video calls per day as I'm having right now. So all are available, all are focused. So just to just touch base, hi, how are you? Because you develop all these relationships and friendships with our colleagues from all over the world. To questions specifically related, of course, for the accreditation and how do we tackle that? And people need confirmation and affirmation always saying, oh, can I do this? Are we changing the GMAT admission? What do we do with that? So always you have also to answer on the spot or try to provide guidance. That meant internally we had a lot of work to be done of how do we communicate with this. And I'm very happy that what we did is immediately have a dedicated frequently asked question page. It's a living document, a living page. to provide our schools with the answers as much as possible, which try to provide some guidance. So far, what we are able to do is whether it is accreditation, visits related, the technicalities of it, but some of the other issues that it is standards related. And I will go a little bit more details in a minute about that. But the resources that we have, we noticed at AACSB, so we have a virtual platform called the AACSB Exchange, where schools discuss, meet, and they have different possibilities to collaborate, thematic, geographical, what have you, which we historically need to push people to use that, to leverage of this, the membership benefit that they have. This is becoming more and more useful, and we see the discussions between the schools. So this is a quick change in the way of dealing with the pandemic. And this is to the point that most of you touched upon earlier on about the lack of this human contact, the lack of that communication. It is isolated, you're very isolated working remotely. So there are possibilities to connect between faculty, some of the leadership in different positions. So this is helping the communication of what we're dealing with. What are the challenges that you are having here, best practices, and different organizations. I'm not saying only AACSB did that, but different organizations. So in the EU, I follow that very closely of what they are doing for the European Commission and different organizations, the series of webinars that they have to keep people connected and up to date. Another decision that we needed to make, we had our global conference, and this is the largest conference, 1,500 people every year, and this is in person, almost always in the US, every 10 years leaves the US. But this was supposed to be in Denver, everybody's prepared, and we all had the tickets months purchased ahead, and that was the decision of how do we continue with this. And luckily, we decided to keep it virtually. So we had our very first experience of having a virtual conference. It was over 800 people participating in it. A huge success, the feedback that we received. People felt that touch of the nostalgia, the experience that they have every year, meeting friends and colleagues from everywhere. Although this is just trying to chat and so on, but the topics and the discussions, as you can imagine, it was all COVID related or dominant by it. So it was very interesting to reconnect. So I'm very, very happy that we managed to keep that. The other part how we needed to deal with is that, as I said, we are a volunteer organization. So we are 90 staff, but we have 1,700 volunteers in different capacities. 750 of them are accreditation volunteers. So these are the people who they make the decisions on the accreditation. They go on the visits. They need to get on the plane and go and visit the school and spend the 3 days there, or in different capacities in the operating committees that we have at AACSB. So working with them on now and the aftermath of what will happen as the impact starts to surface of the questions of assurance of learning, faculty qualifications, moving to online learning and so on. So this is not the AACSB that is making the decision, but it, as I said, the volunteers. So helping and educating the volunteers to have a more of a flexible lens, how they see the schools through the accreditation process in the coming months and so on. We took that responsibility, of course, to communicate it. That will be part of their training and how they have their reasonable judgment working with the schools moving forward. So what we added now immediately, so this is what became compulsory in the reporting. So helping the schools reporting about the impact of the COVID-19 to date. So the enrollment, the finances, faculty and staff hiring, the delivery modes, of course, the assurance of learning, which we've got a lot of questions about, but we always had schools that they are online or blended learning. More than half switched now to online learning, but to the point that we had earlier on, people having the capacity, the skill to do online learning, and the mental health also for the students and so on, capacity of how long they can continue having online learning. That goes all part of the assurance of learning and the development of soft skills. It's not only about online learning, but what we are assessing of these graduates, what they are having in terms of skills. So the part of the reporting, the actions that the school is taking to address it, and of course we have a specific focus on how the school is supporting the students and the faculty. So how are you dealing with, because these are also your stakeholders, your faculty, the staff. So that to the point was earlier on, have being available, being responsive, replying to the emails and so on, and the services. So how is that maintained during that period? Also expecting to be reported. And the last point, as you can see, whether that impacted the alignment with the accreditation standards, because we understand the difficulty that it is happening. We have different processes now, how we are going to deal with the schools with their visits, continuous improvement visits going to happen virtually. Initial accreditation, we are unable to compromise, the board is against it and so on. We want boots on the ground to be there and see the school and so on. So all that was pushed a few months, and we are working case by case with the schools, because as you know, every country situation is absolutely different. And the last advice we do with the school is using chronological reporting. So where were you? So where were you 5 years ago, 3 years ago? What were you planning, and where you are right now? So this is how we are going to look at the schools and how they are developing or developed in the initial accreditation process, if we're speaking about initial accreditation, until they are having their visit ready. So that's all for me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan, for your informative presentation. Frankly speaking, you have touched on many points that it was a question in my head personally. Things like whether the accreditation body will be considering the situation of the higher education or the College of Business throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and how this would be impacting their evaluation. So you have absolutely answered most of the questions in my head. However, there is one question in my head that I would leave it to you till the end. Is about the virtual visits. So I'll leave it till the end, and sure. I would like to welcome Professor Alam, because he is now with us on board finally, and I would like to welcome him. Hello, Professor Alam.
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you very well. Thank you.
Okay.
And welcome, and thank you for your patience.
Okay. So I have to share my slides, right?
Yes, but before we start with your presentation, Professor Alam, can we end it with Miss Samantha, and then we come back to you, if you don't mind?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So can we go with Miss Samantha, please? I will leave the floor to you. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely, and I hope everyone can hear me. And I think my slides are showing. Is that right?
Yes.
All right.
Can we stick to the time, Ms. Samantha?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So it's wonderful to be with you all here, and thank you for having me. I think presenting towards the end of the group is always a task, because so many people have presented wonderful ideas, and so I hope that my contribution will build on some of those, and also to reinforce some of the common themes that I think we are seeing throughout the many presentations. So to give you a brief introduction, my name is Samantha Miles. I'm the head of learning for a company called Knowledge-E, and we have a bit of a unique perspective in this panel, because Knowledge-E is actually a private company. We're based out of Dubai, but we work with institutions including universities, research centers, and government institutes really across the entire MENA region, and even around the world in other emerging economies in Africa and Asia and places like this. So it's very exciting to be here. And prior to joining Knowledge-E, my background is in higher education leadership, and I was privileged enough to work at universities across the United States, Australia, and Dubai. So, so I'm happy to be here, and I'm hoping that we can share a little bit of useful information for everybody. So the key points that I wanted to hone in on in talking with you all today is I wanted to share some insights that we acquired over the past 2 months from 3 free webinars that we hosted from March to April. So one of the things that we immediately responded to, and this actually touches back to the very first thing that we heard during this presentation, which is the idea that in order to succeed, we need to all work together. And so one of the things that we immediately did is we started hosting some free webinars, just 45-minute webinars, trying to give some tips to our different access partners and to people in our network. Now, we hosted these webinars and over 700 participants joined from more than 45 countries. So we were astounded by the response rate. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to share with you some of the key insights that we received after giving these webinars from our participants across domains and across countries and from multiple universities. So the first is that the number one challenge, the number one question that we continually were asked about over and over again was around assessment. And assessment in a very practical way. People and professors are really stumped around how do we shift from that traditional assessment mode to meaningful assessment in the online environment. And I'll touch a little bit about some of those insights. The next one, and I think we already alluded to this, I believe it was Professor Nina was talking about the idea that in order to provide effective online learning, it actually does require a lot more effort, both in terms of time, of the commitment of the professors, but also in terms of the creativity. It's requiring a lot of those professors to stretch their mind and to think about their content in a new way. And I think we all know that as professors, there's some professors who have been teaching their subject area for decades, and so all of a sudden asking them to really stretch and to rethink the way that they're teaching is really challenging. And then the final takeaway was that in order for this transition to be successful, that there has to be collaborative engagement all the way from the university leadership through to the professors and of course the students, and I'll touch a little bit upon that as well. But ultimately, it is worth noting that this response is truly a paradigm shift. We've talked a lot about this traditional learning, the sage on the stage, to all of a sudden asking for instructors and students to collaborate, to develop knowledge in this competency, skills-based context that requires creative and critical thinking. And it's a really big challenge, but it's also an amazing opportunity. And when we look at countries around the world who have done this really well, they started working on this like in the 80s. They've been working on this for 20, for 30 years, and it's a big task. It's a big thing to do. And so when we look at this response, all of a sudden we're being thrown into the fire. And so we actually see this looking across the region as an opportunity to leapfrog. We might be able to leapfrog decades. And it's one of those things where there's always resistance to curriculum change, and there's always resistance to trying to shift our teaching methodologies. But if professors, it's like, you've got to do it. The students are learning online. And so we think it's a really great opportunity to leapfrog and really make this an advancement. So I apologize, my slides are not changing. Give me just 1 second here. So I just want to hone in on a few key takeaways. So when we gave this webinar, we asked our participants, what were the key learning takeaways that you found to be most useful? And so I just want to share these with you. And I hope that this information adds and builds on to some of the topics that we've already covered. And it's really practical stuff around experiences to avoid, activities to avoid, and thoughts to avoid when it comes to online learning. So we talked about overwhelming yourselves and overwhelming your students, losing student participation, and missing learning from group discussion. One of the hardest things to do in an online environment is to actually make meaningful learning connections in those group discussions, and they're such valuable assets that a teacher has at their disposal that we really want to make sure that we don't miss out on it. Activities to avoid. We've got to get away from long live lectures. We have to get away from big assignments because, as we know, the workload is too huge. You can't have big assignments. It's just not practical to deliver. We don't want one-on-one instructor-only communication. And when we talk about assessment, we don't want assessment just for the sake of doing it. I think one of the challenges that as educators we face is sometimes we have to have those measurable outcomes. And so we're going, okay, look at these assessments. This is where they were at the beginning of the semester. Here's where they are at the end. And when we teach online, rather than doing it for metrics, we really have to ask ourselves, is every single assessment measuring a competency? Are we thinking in our mind, okay, what is the competency that I am trying to assess in this situation? And how can I do that in a way where I want them to apply the knowledge? So instead of checking a multiple choice box, how can I design an assessment that is going to force them to apply their knowledge? And what's the most challenging, I had mentioned before about professors stepping out of their comfort zone and thinking more creatively. The biggest challenge to having a successful assessment in the online environment is we have a lot of issues around academic integrity and how do we keep the students from copying each other and cheating and etc. And there is a way to design your assessments in order to make sure that cheating on an assignment is actually harder than just doing the assignment the way you asked, through reiterations, through scaffolding, through summative assessments that lead to formative assessments. So there's a lot of tools and techniques out there, but they're hard, they're time consuming, and they involve creativity. And so therefore, we have to support each other. You find faculty members who are good at this type of assessment, and you need administration and leadership to support you in developing those tools because it really is a big challenge. And then finally, is these thoughts to avoid. So it's been a really wonderful blessing to see all of the educators community coming together during this time, but it's still very easy to feel isolated when you're teaching online. And so we found that one of the things that we did is we had some surveys of these 750 participants, and we were asking, how are you feeling about teaching? What are your concerns? What's going on in your heads? And it's really important that professors do not feel like they have to do it alone. Another one is believing that your students can't help or won't engage, because we have a lot of professors that say, my students aren't used to learning this way and they're going to resist me. But we have to hold our students accountable, and it's about finding that balance between holding them accountable for their learning, but also still providing them with the guidance that they need in order to achieve what we want them to achieve. And then finally, it's about, we want to avoid feeling like you need to know everything or that you have to be perfect. I think one of the key lessons that we have learned from our network is that it's okay to be human. Be transparent with your students. Tell them, I'm having technical difficulties, or hey, I'm not wearing shoes right now, or, just infusing that humor, creating that sense of environment and engagement. Just be a human. And I think particularly because we're in the higher education sector, our students are adults, so we have to treat them as such. And I think providing those opportunities to show that you're a human allows the students to show you that they're a human as well too. And on that note as well, one of the great opportunities with online learning that I don't think has been mentioned yet today is the fact that a lot of times in the online environment, we get to see sides of students that we haven't seen before. And so when we think about face-to-face learning, a lot of times there's students that might be shy. They might not want to contribute in the middle of a big lecture hall. But when it's an online forum, when we're having asynchronous conversations, all of a sudden they open up and they blossom, and you realize, man, these students have great ideas. Now, I know that I'm running short on time, so I don't want to overgo. But I just wanted to share a few strategies very quickly to wrap up, which is around asynchronous conversations, learning by teaching, grazing versus meals. I will highlight this one because we found that it's incredibly effective for educators, which is the idea of, instead of giving them a whole heap of information up front and then asking them about it, give them opportunities to graze, to pick and to choose and to see what they want to do. And then of course, to understand that there are tons of technology opportunities out there for you to take advantage of. There's some amazing products out there, and there's also free products. So I think making sure that you pool your resources, that you take time to see what exists that can support you, can really help you build your confidence there. And I think that I will not go through each of these because I know we're short on time. So I think I'll wrap up there and say thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Samantha. I couldn't agree anymore because honestly, what you have mentioned there is just so true. Specifically about the students that they are shy to contribute in the classroom. They really. You know, I personally had more than one example of such cases. So yes, a lot of the students will find it much more, you know, convenient for them to participate through online platforms, maybe not through, you know, face communication through video conferencing, but also through, you know, typing the answer through the chat rooms, etc., etc. So yes, absolutely, you are right about that. Now I'll leave the floor to Professor Alam, and I would like to thank him once again for his patience and that really allowed it to have him again today with us. So thank you very much. Would you like me to share your slides, Professor Alam, or are you sharing it with us?
I am just clicked on sharing them. Would they be, can you see them or you will share them?
No, I think it's getting there.
Can you see them?
I can see them.
But can you see me? Okay.
Yes.
So I just go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay. So thank you very much, Dr. Isra. Thank you, Professor Hawaj, Professor Mansour, and all Ahliya team. I'm very grateful for the invitation. And thank you very much for making all the efforts to connect me. I have never had any doubt but that Ahliya will be able to technically connect me, because in 2017, during our international conference, that was the best live conference coverage for any of our international conferences. So even someone wrote about it in Europe here. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Very big topic, and I will go ahead very quickly because of the time. Now, this topic is quite big, and I'm really glad you have discussed this topic because I think it's quite important. Is everything okay with the slides?
Yes, everything is fine.
Excellent. Now I will go ahead quickly. I have selected the title Strategic Planning and Leadership in Higher Education because I think this is what's important. What is going to happen now? It needs future and visionary leaders or transformative leaders who can move quickly with what is happening now. So I will give very quick policy directions for both COVID. Now, the pictures on the left, you can see there are a lot of logos here. And the reason I mention them, we have been dealing with lots of organizations for the last 15 or 20 years, but we have primarily been able to do so because of the technology, of the connectivity with the broadband and so on. So we have already been connecting online. Now, before we have the COVID-19, before we have the coronavirus, all universities, higher education, my university included, we have all in higher education been discussing about our curriculum and programs are very tired. They have been both content and delivery. We have been discussing this in the UK, in America, and I'm sure in Bahrain and every place about how to renovate the content and the delivery of our programs. And this should include real world problems. This issue, I've been in a conference yesterday with lots of people from the Middle East, they're saying the same. We need to connect this to real daily problem, embedding academic entrepreneurship. This is again, the World Bank is talking about this, employability and lifelong learning. So we already have been discussing this in the last 5 to 10 years, but the last 5 years have been like this. So what exactly now the question is how to sustain university confidence about its future, because I can see it in the UK from several vice chancellors. We keep getting letters, we keep being told the UK universities are going through a very difficult time. In fact, last night at 6 o'clock news, which is the main news here by the BBC, there was a big report about how universities are now considering seriously to re-innovate itself quickly, because we may not have any international students coming to our campuses this September. So we already been starting thinking about our future. So today more than ever, I think in human history, the readiness of nations depend on the quality of higher education. The World Bank is talking about the welfare and the economic development of countries depend on the quality of higher education. But today, to cope and to go through this crisis, it depends on how ready we are. And to give you one example, our government here in the United Kingdom, and I'm sure my colleagues may have received that email, our parliament contacted all academics across the United Kingdom, giving them a list of topics and research area where the government needs a quick help. So you go online, you put your name, okay, I can provide technical support or I can provide knowledge on this. This is the United Kingdom Parliament. So you can see how important universities to help countries go through through this time of difficulty. Secondly, in this post-COVID-19 era, we will have different kind of global skills and knowledge race. We will be fighting each other. We will be competing on a different set of skills. One example, and I'm definitely saying this with full confidence on heart, like what's his name, Haitham, your technical colleagues there, who managed to fix, and eventually he said to me, okay, let me fix another thing. I will connect you from an email from Bahrain. So this is a kind of a skill. This is a moment of truth. Either he will connect me or he will lose me. So universities cannot fail to realize, accept, and accomplish its natural and ascribed roles as a strategic agent for national development remotely. The reason I mention remotely, universities now, to help countries, they need to consider the digital and this remote teaching. Situate the university more boldly and robustly within the dynamic global digital system. Now we are in a different knowledge digital system. We have to make sure Ahliya or Oxford or Cambridge, we all into this together because we are all locked down. We have to be robustly embedded there. Keep re-articulating the academic and research mission and strategic priorities in the face of dynamically changing national and global challenges. What we are facing in the United Kingdom, not necessarily what you are facing in Bahrain, but what we are going through is the same like what you are going. And I have been talking about this. The whole world, it went through three revolutions: industrialization, globalization, and industrialization, information, and we are in a globalization era. The COVID-19 pandemic is a globalization challenges. So we are all in this, but we have different challenges. Continuously scrutinize your robust system and procedure. And the robust system, like the system you have, you manage to get all these people now online. Your procedures to safeguard excellence and best practices, because we will have to come back again. No matter what we are going to do, how we're going to teach, it's still we're going to be judged by how we're going to deliver excellent education and learning. Best practices, standards, people who are doing the QA and all the experts have talked before me, they will come back and say, yes, we understand we are teaching remotely, but we have to still ensure quality. No one will fly from Bahrain to study at Sussex or Oxford or Cambridge if the quality is dropped. The same thing, no one will fly to study in Bahrain if the quality drops. So quality assurance and control mechanism. I will go quickly because I know my time. Professor Hawaj mentioned earlier, universities, they have to face to the real challenges. This is what is the whole globe is facing. And this is a slide. If you look at this slide, we're all facing crisis, conflict, water resources, and so on and so forth. The pandemic is a global crisis and universities should stand up for these challenges. Secondly, previously with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals we have been discussing, you can see the center of all these challenges is education. And then you have the knowledge, the innovation, because if you can see, governments cannot do it alone. So universities have to take a lead because we are in the heart of education, which is primary and secondary and university. And finally, in the challenges, the world has already changed. We are already in a digital economy. We are already in a digital environment. We are already moving from oil-based to knowledge-based. This book we published in 2015 to document the experience of United Arab Emirates, your neighbor in the region, as a leading country moving towards moving away from oil to knowledge-based. So the world is already moving. We have been going through this, but we didn't realize how we have been going through this journey. On the top right-hand corner, this is a cover from The Economist. You can see for a long time, people are talking about making money from Facebook, Google, and so on. On the bottom down, you can see this book about innovation and startups in the GCC. So Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and others are already talking about this. Tunisia, to mention just quickly, is becoming a good country, with a leading country in data science. So why now we need to reposition and rebrand the university as an excellent provider of transformative education? We have to talk now as leader of higher education about transformation. And the problem is we need to transform now. So by September, we have a new intake of students, whether in Bahrain or in the UK, with this transformation in place. Like my colleague just mentioned, we need to change research, achieve national and international recognition during the global lockdown. We are locked, but we have to survive. Changing expectation of students. This is quite a big topic. I was been talking on a conference last night. Now students, they're going to be remotely talking to us like now. Imagine I'm teaching now. They will be in their pajamas. There will be no interactivity and so on. They need to be excited. They say, okay, if you're not going to excite me, Alam, I will watch your video after you finish. This interactivity will not work if we are not really changing the way we're going to deliver the talk. Increase competition. And this is very important. I will mention it for Ahliya and other universities. In the UK, we are now expecting to have no international students coming to our campus this summer, this September. So what does that mean? Students from Bahrain or from Saudi Arabia, from UAE, from Sudan, from Egypt, who were thinking before to come to UK, now because of the virus, from the COVID and so on, they might think of local sub-providers. So you need to stand up. There's an opportunity. Students from Bahrain who were thinking to come to the UK, now their parents, they will say, okay, let me teach them in Bahrain or in Ahliya because there is so many advantages now. That's exactly what happened. And the proof to this, schools in the United Kingdom opened 3-4 days ago. Many parents, myself included, I did not send my kids to the school. I'm still not very confident on the safety of my kids. So my kids are studying from home now. They will choose to study at home and so on. Increase competition. This education system, this infrastructure, digital technologies, they need money. This is very costly. And then we talk about reduced income. We all have to bring our income down, and then changing technology, which like Professor Al-Ali earlier mentioned. I will just try to finish quickly. I know I am exceeding my time, but I will finish quickly. This is a very famous quote from the man, which we call him the father and the founder of data science. This is a man which he taught all of us, whether directly or indirectly, about data science. He said, very famous quote, 85% of the reasons of failure are deficiencies in the system and process rather than the employee. So this can lead us now, in order to survive and to be strong and not to fail, we need to consider the systems and the procedures. And that's what my colleagues have said. I will finish. In order to attract the students, one just example, this is my famous slide, one example. I always say to my colleagues, this is how if you ask me, Alam, I would like to be an academic, I would like to be a teacher, I will open your eyes and I say to you, a good teacher will explain how things happen. A superior teacher demonstrate how you score the goal. He will say to you, you throw the ball and it will go through that ring and you score the goal. But the great teacher is the one who will inspire his students. So to finish, if you really want to change, you want to deal with this remote learning, attracting students, you need to be an inspirational lecturer. If you cannot become an inspirational lecturer, students will not watch your lecture live. They will watch for the video and they will do it. And I will finish the current global lockdown, as Professor Al-Ali said, Professor Hawaj said, and 3 of my colleagues said, creates a case to genuinely pursue international collaboration, not only in areas of curriculum research, development, learning and teaching research methodology, but also in quality accreditation and faculty capacity. It is the time, because I am now talking to my colleagues, 10 of them, including all of the distinguished professors there. It is now the opportunity for us to cultivate this negative impact of the lockdown into a very positive message, which it is a time for us to cooperate. And Bahrain is a very famous country. I always cite it, where people from different backgrounds, different religions, they have managed to live together. So we, the academics, should manage to work together from America, from Africa, from Asia. Professor Hawaj mentioned, and thank you very much. Sorry if I exceeded my time.
Thank you very much, Professor Alam, for your informative presentation. Yeah, honestly speaking, you have touched upon the Sustainable Development Goals, and absolutely, this is something that we are all working towards that. Specifically, goal number 4, which is related to education quality, and I believe all the regulatory authorities, including Education and Training Quality Authority, have linked their strategies in line with the Sustainable Development Goals to assure and maintain the highest quality standards in terms of education in Bahrain. And that's where we have aligned all our strategies in line with their strategies as well. So I will now leave the floor to Professor Mansour to start the questions with the speakers. And we will try to keep the answers very short in order to maximize the benefit of having this, you know, as much as we can of the speakers as well as the attendees. Thank you. Victor, you're on mute. Thank you.
Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Really, I am impressed. And I think Dr. Isra will ask me to give a conclusion at the end or general remarks. And I have made some fantastic points because I really am impressed with all the presentations and the amount of knowledge. And this is by all means a fantastic international gathering. And it is really a fantastic collaboration project, if you like, where people with all this expertise from leading organizations have joined together and given us this opportunity. So thank you very much for giving Ahliya the chance to welcome you and host you. Thank you, Dr. Isra, for really exceptionally managing the forum. We will start asking questions, myself and Dr. Isra, alternatively. I will start by Professor Alam. He came last, but I will start with first question. If you can please make the answers, as Dr. Isra mentioned, to a minute to maximum 1.5 to 2 minutes, because then we'll all have a chance to benefit from each other. Thank you. Professor Alam, to which extent do you think the United Nations SDGs supported universities around the world to be prepared for COVID-19 pandemic?
Very short answer, not very much. And I think in several reports, even the UN itself have confirmed that there is lots of shortcomings. And the proof for that, the UN has only looked at e-learning last year. And I will send all of you the link to the workshop we did here jointly with Petru from the United Nations Joint Inspection Unit. And it was, I'm not saying it is a shame, but at least a good thing. The UN now realized the importance of e-learning, but they came too late. They haven't yet even advised us how to do it. So that's a very short answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Isra.
I think the next question is with you, Doctor.
With me as well. Okay. Yes. Yes. All right. That's fine. Yes. My next question is for Professor Abdullah Al-Hawaj. Can you hear me, Professor Abdullah? Professor Abdullah Al-Hawaj, are you with us?
I don't think he's with us.
I will save his questions till the end then, so maybe he can join us. Maybe if he can log out and join in again, maybe Haytham can deal with him to relog him in. The next is with you, Isra.
Okay, my question is for Professor George and Dr. Anastasia. In your opinion, what do we need to consider as a priority in order to create a paradigm shift in teaching and learning?
You want to take it, George?
In general, based on all the presentations that we had, the new paradigm will be based on a hybrid model. I know that, in September we'll be going more based on the distance learning delivery. However, everybody recognizing the value of some face-to-face contact, both with our students and our partners. So I think the priority would be to find the right balance between distance learning and face-to-face, and develop instructional designs which encompass all these elements.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Our next question is for Dr. Ashwin from QS. Why student well-being is so important for ranking? Why do you think student well-being is so important for ranking? Dr. Ashwin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Mansoor. Well, I think student well-being is not captured in any rankings at the moment, and I think a good start point would be to start looking at student outcomes and then getting into student well-being. But I think what I could say is it is an important topic. It is covered by a lot of national ratings at this time, and I think it should increasingly be captured more and more while we are having isolation from other people, and as people are more and more during these last couple of months not getting the opportunity to interact as much. I think it is a priority, and I think we've seen when we interviewed students across the world, the risk of isolation and the risk of their mental health being challenged at this time is really high, and not just students. I think that goes even for faculty members. We are currently working on a survey to look at what do faculty have to think about this as well, because there is definitely a screen between you and everybody else. It can't replace the emotions you will have in a classroom, the emotions you'll have in a hall where you have different students and faculty interacting in your labs. So I wish we can start looking at that, and I think the time perhaps has come for evaluation agencies like QS and others to see how we could adapt and adopt this in rankings in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Isra. Thank you, Dr. Ashwin. Thank you.
Okay, my question is for Dr. Nina. And my question is, in your opinion, what strategies should HEI consider in order to optimize the e-learning experience for all those involved?
Well, to begin with, I think somebody mentioned the leadership aspect. I think it's probably like the first step, because, you know, when you have the correct type of leadership, they will basically like pave the way. They pave the way for the creation of the right type of culture, the right, vision, the right kinds of values, and everything that comes along, everything that is associated with it, in terms of basically like policies and procedures and practices and professional development and all of this. So I think that strategy is very important, and basically investing in the right places, because, you know, like investing, for example, in the infrastructure and the systems and all of that, this is something that is not new. As someone said, you know, they started doing this from the 80s. So everybody almost now has this. We noticed in Bahrain, like when we did our last e-learning now study, we're still waiting for the results, by the way, of HEIs, that, you know, the infrastructure is there, the systems are there and everything. However, the investment needs to come in other things, in relation basically to some of the aspects that were talked about today, like the social presence, the professional learning development, creating professional learning communities between the faculty. I think it was Samantha who mentioned this, not working, you know, alone, the faculty. These are very important strategies, and they need to be set by the leadership, you know, from the start, and be a part of that culture that they are creating in an institution. So.
Thank you. My next question is for Dr. Hassan. In terms of international accreditation requirements, AACSB, COVID-19 affects universities to assess assurance of learning. Will this situation be considered by the accreditation body such as AACSB?
Of course, I think I touched upon it briefly in the presentation of how we are looking at the assurance of learning, because part of it is how the school is dealing with the blended and online learning, but they have other measures, of course, assessing the students. But more than half of the schools shifted now, and part of it is the learning experience for the students. As I said, specific soft skills and so on, how that will be assessed, how that's going to be measured. So the schools, we are expecting to have a plan of how that's going to be assessed. So there is no reaction towards whether online and no online. It's not that, because we already deal with the schools that have been offering this for a long time, only online programs or blended. But to be able to assess a student's experience, there is the component of what they are developing of skills, accumulated knowledge, and until they graduate, that needs to be provided in evidence, and that needs to be proven for us.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, my next question is for Ms. Asmat. And it is about, could you elaborate to which extent the National Qualification Framework can play a role in supporting the higher education institutions in supporting or preparing the students for online learning?
Okay, as you know, Dr. Asra, the National Qualifications Framework have the capacity already in recognizing formal, informal, and non-formal learning, and part of the non-formal and informal comes the virtual and online learning. So these in nature, the qualification framework have the capacity to recognize that. The challenges that we have now comes within the legislation, the supportive policies, and how we can work on this, and also work on our standards to incorporate this. So in terms of being able to recognize and support, and as you know, one of our standards included also the recognition of prior learning and experience, which all the HEIs were expected to work on developing policies and procedures on this. So the challenge now, as I said, that we need to push for this, we need to work together. We have learned from the pandemic that we need to consider the blended learning, the virtual learning. So all the stakeholders in Bahrain, I think we need to sit together and look into this and to push for it, and use the framework as a tool to push for it and support it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Aswan.
Thank you. Our next question is to Ms. Annie. Considering the situation in Lebanon prior to COVID-19, how did you tackle student behavior and acceptance of virtual learning in your university and in Lebanon at large? Ms. Annie.
You're muted.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the question, Dr. Mansour. In fact, you know, the Lebanese students are really quite tech savvy, and therefore the transformation or the shift to online learning was not like a major shock. It's just that, you know, there needed to be some adjustments here and there and certain support for students. And we didn't, in fact, encounter unlike what some people might, feel, we did not encounter any behavioral issues with students. On the contrary, the only thing that I can think of is probably the panic mode, which is common, and it was pervasive even with the adults. So, the intent of the university to offer as much services and be available and counseling and helping, listening to them, caring for them was done abundantly to just minimize, that sort of unease with the students. And it's been quite successful, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Right. The next question is for Ms. Samantha, and you have touched upon virtual transition. So in your opinion, we as higher education institutes, what are those strategies or steps that we need to do in order to, you know, embed or in order to go for virtual transition? You're mute. Your mic, please.
So sorry. That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking it. It's hard to answer that one quickly because there's so many strategies. But in addition to what Dr. Nina mentioned, which is that it starts with the leadership, what I would say is it also starts at taking a really hard look at curriculum. Whenever we've worked with organizations about refining curriculum or changing their curriculum, you've got to make some tough decisions. And when we're looking at online teaching, we're really trying to maximize our efficiency and our impact. And we can't be precious about things. You know, we really got to look at our curriculum and say, what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? And is what I'm teaching and is what I'm assessing in alignment with those? And if it's not, you got to cut it, you know, and you've really got to look with a critical eye in how we can maximize our learning. And you also have to look with a creative heart in order to engage our students in a way that is going to be meaningful. So I think for us, the most successful systems that we have seen has been when you start with the end in mind and you really start with that competency-based model and you work backwards from there, and you just have to take the challenge on head on. And I would also just like to mention as well too, I think a really great strategy for higher eds to implement is the early adopter strategy. So identifying those key players in your faculty and in your staff who are those early adopters who can be your pioneers and who can get everybody else engaged, because without having that network of system of passionate people driving this change, it's a really tough battle.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. My next question is to Professor Allam. Professor Allam, considering COVID-19,
yes,
what in your view are the SDGs which are really relevant at this stage for HEIs to consider and should be given some attention?
Okay, this is very important question. I think that definitely number one will be the health, because SDG which deal with health and well-being, because this crisis in principle was about health. But to take that into account, all the others SDGs, they have also been important. But then the next one, if I take them in some order, after the health and well-being, we will go to education, because part of the problem we are facing now is really educational thing. Doctors, consultants have talked every day. Today I've been contacted by a big group from UAE with UAE Red Crescent want to help Sudan doctors. I've been contacted by British group here, one in Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. Many consultants, many doctors, lots of webinars, lots of advice, whether in Arabic, English, French, South Africa, everywhere. So that has been plenty of supply. What is missing is the social science. To educate people not to go to each other. We still can see funeral. We can still see people, even in London. I don't know if you heard the news in London 2 days ago. We just heard it today. Big group of people in South London, or in West London. They came for a party, big party, street party in London. So the police, they have to bring lots of vans, helicopters, and imagine, not only just the health hazard, all these vans, police, helicopters to secure the place from 2 o'clock in the morning, from 10 o'clock in the night until 4 o'clock in the morning is huge cost. So I think education is very critical. And then it goes further up. ICT, which is innovation, which is SDG 9 to do with the industry, and then the cycle will go. But even if you look at all of them, number 17, collaboration and partnership is also very important. What you're doing now, Professor, is partnership. You're having people from all over the world, academia, industry, and so on. So all of these have really shown the importance of looking at all these SDG. And also the question is very good, because always people have been arguing for a multidisciplinary approach to look at these SDGs. You can't have education alone to solve it. You can't have, and I have been argued with lots of consultants, doctors. Please kindly understand, you have done a lot of work now. We need to focus more on the social science community. That's where you can see the importance of it. I wouldn't want to talk longer, but yes, there are some they look very important, like health, but without the others, we can't solve it, Professor.
Thank you, Professor Allah. Thank you. The next question for Professor Abdullah Al-Hawaj. I don't know if he is with us. Professor Abdullah, are you with us?
No.
Dr. Mansour, he can listen only. He is facing difficulties, technical difficulties. I'm working with him.
All right, so we will save the questions for him till the end. Let us know when he is on, please.
Right. So the next question from my end to Professor George or Dr. Anastasia. And we're trying to be at the positive side. So considering the COVID-19 pandemic, what are those advantages that we can carry away with us to create a better teaching and learning, or a shift in teaching and learning?
Hi, yes. I think I'm a firm believer that from every challenge is not a challenge, it's actually an opportunity, and we should be aiming to turn it on its head. So to give you an example from everyday life in a UK university, we've got group of students that will need additional support in their learning or their assessment because they have learning difficulties or disabilities. So we need to provide some adjustments and make the environment more inclusive. Some of the changes we have been forced to implement in order to respond with COVID means that we no longer need to see this group of students or staff for that sake as a separate group we need to accommodate. Every practice becomes far more inclusive. So to give you an example, with online delivery or online assessment, we don't need separate rooms. We don't need to worry about rooms accessible for wheelchair users. We don't need to worry about material to be specifically available online for them, because everything is for everybody equally. So from one perspective, one opportunity has been that we design out any inequalities. We become more diverse in our practice for our staff and students, and far more inclusive.
Thank you. That's really positive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My next question is for Dr. Ashwin. In your view, Dr. Ashwin, out of all these things you have heard from all the speakers and all the impact Corona has had on higher education institutions, which are the real serious and emergent factors that you think you will consider as part of your criteria for ranking? Which ones have really come up in your view at the top?
Well, I think the question of internationalization has always been a concern for a lot of people. And I think international students in some countries, even though the percentage is 5% each, in our criteria, definitely people do raise a concern about international students. International faculty is another concern, and I think a lot of the countries besides the GCC which can afford to get into international faculty, the other countries in the Arab region I work with do have a concern about, why international faculty should be on campus, why can't they be online? So if this pandemic continues for long, and we can see that already how international faculty are brought in virtually, providing the same level of teaching what you would do on campus. So I think that would be the first thing which would change in perhaps any ranking which looks at internationalization, changing international faculty definitions. I don't know at this time. We still are anticipating that we'll go back to everything back to normal in the next few months. But I think this will actually channel a lot of debate in the future on the real meaning of internationalization. Also, international students, now, while you can offer the entire course online, there is no need for the student perhaps to actually be on campus throughout. The student can be studying at his home, wherever it is in the world, and that could be an international student. So more than us changing the definitions, I think it will change the game into how people define internationalization. So maybe the metrics will not change, but people are going to see internationalization differently in the future. So that is the most important takeaway. What we have seen, I've seen throughout at the moment throughout the world. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwin. Thank you.
Okay. My next question is for Dr. Nina. Dr. Nina, in your opinion, how we as HEI can plan further in order to envision blended learning? Because we believe that from this point onward, we need to go for a higher percentage of blended learning in terms of not only a course level, also program level. And what are the required action needed from an HEI, regulatory authority, and also quality assurance authority in this regard?
Okay, wow. You expect a short answer, huh? Okay, to begin with, I'll take the easy way out. You know, at the quality assurance, we are really very strong believers in benchmarking and in learning from external reference points. So I think, like, if I had an HEI for myself and I want to introduce blended learning like on a program level, because I know some have it on a course level, that is where I would start. I believe that you should not really start things from scratch. There are a lot of good models internationally of blended learning, and I think the HEI needs to do its research and benchmark and basically learn from what others are doing, and then of course customize its blended learning programs according to its needs and its culture and what fits it best. Because maybe something we did not really mention today is that even in the online environment or in the online learning and the online courses and all of that, cultural elements really need to be taken into consideration, especially because many times you will have like students and faculty from different backgrounds and the diversity that Anastasia mentioned before. I mean, this comes in. So it's very important to do that. So that was the first part of the question. The second part of the question, I think you talked about the regulatory bodies here in Bahrain. I mean, of course, I can only maybe speak on behalf of the BQA and not any other regulatory body, but we really like to see, as everyone has been talking today about this collaboration, we'd like to see other regulatory bodies in the kingdom maybe beginning to consider recognizing, these new forms of learning, whether blended or whether full-fledged online, programs, because we still don't have that, as you know, here in Bahrain. But in terms of the BQA, I mean, our frameworks at the Directorate of Higher Education Reviews that we have both for the program reviews and for the institutional reviews. We have had the opportunity now with the COVID-19 and with this e-learning experience and this last basically review that we had of all the universities in Bahrain, in terms of surveying them, and also we had a select sample of universities which we actually did like a review where we had interviews with the stakeholders and all of this and looked at what they are doing in terms of practice and their learning management systems and all of that. What we learned is that our frameworks really are ready to evaluate any kind of e-learning provision if it were blended or if it even was basically like full-fledged online. However, all we would need to add to it are just a few expectations under our standards, but everything else will be the same in terms of, for example, alignment with intended learning outcomes, in terms of, for example, the assessment, what we expect, the summative, the formative, the basically maybe the mix, the variety, and all of this, and the things that Samantha mentioned also. Maybe that would be something new, that focus on the programmatic assessment, the chunking instead of the big assessment. So we just need to do that, but really as an authority, I think we are ready. We just need to do just a few amendments. So that's very, very quickly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nina. It's actually really answered what I was looking for. And yes, I agree, because you have supported us as higher education with your standards to build a real robust quality management system. So thank you very much. Professor Mansour? The mic, Professor Mansour.
Oh, yes, Dr. Hassan, you know the factors or the issues of faculty intellectual contribution, faculty participation and classification. To what extent do you think you will consider these in your accreditation? You know, AACSB is a leading accreditation agency, and what they take as a feature or a criteria is vital. How much to what extent do you think you will consider these factors in your accreditation as a result of COVID-19?
Very, very good question. First of all, because it is mission driven, so there is expectation from each faculty, each of the school varies. So you have teaching institutions, you have research institutions, so the expectations varies already for each and every institution. In light of what happened right now, what we modified is as faculty preparing to publish, going to conferences, as there will be no conferences in this period and so on, so different proceedings and so on. What will be enough for us is providing the work that is done to prepare for such activities, whether going to publish, collaborations, or different conferences. That will be the evidence expected from the faculty right now when they report for their accreditation.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Thank you. Isra. Isra, your mic is not on.
Sorry about that. My next question is from Ms. Asmat. And Ms. Asmat, you have touched upon a very important point about the recognition of prior learning. And there is a need for, recognizing the recognition of prior learning by higher education and developing the ground basis for it. So, in your opinion, will COVID-19 pandemic and the situation that happened will improve the level of understanding of recognition of prior learning by higher education institutes, as well as any education service provider? And also, do you think this will push towards the recognition of prior learning by regulatory authorities in the future?
Yeah, thank you, Isra. Sure, that will push for that, for the recognition of prior learning, or RPL. As you know, the COVID-19 has drawn the attention that we need our education systems to be more flexible, more responsive. Many people nowadays are learning new skills through online learning. They are gaining micro credentials, small qualifications that for specific skills. People will be changing jobs. The nature of the jobs will be changing after the pandemic. People will be looking for different type of jobs. Most of us, we never imagined that we could do almost everything from home. But yes, we can run our business from home, if not everything, but most of it. So this will change the way people will look at the RPL, or recognition of prior learning. People have been talking about the concept of recognition of prior learning or experience many years back, but I think the pandemic has drawn the attention to the importance of it more and more than ever before. So yes, we need to look at it with a different perspective, realize the importance of it, and regulatory bodies also need to realize that, so to work on regulation, as we mentioned earlier, to facilitate that. And every means of learning matters, and all the work that the learner has done, whether by experience, self-learning, online, it matters, and it should be captured somehow. So what is important in the process is how we assess that. We need assessment centers, you need proper transparent assessment for that, in order for the certificate or the qualification gained through that to be credible.
Thank you. My next question is to Ms. Annie. You know, moving from face-to-face to online teaching and learning puts the special needs group, special needs, whatever type of special needs, put them in a special category. And there must be certain ways and legislations to support them and handle that situation. How did you deal with that situation in this online teaching and learning?
Well, an excellent question and very relevant. As I did mention, our university is really student-centered, and therefore we don't just talk the talk, but we walk the walk. And therefore, you know, in situations whereby students had certain difficulties, be it learning difficulty or physical challenges, then they were really handled very, let's say, carefully by the Dean of Students' offices intervening or, let's say, coordinating rather with the faculty. Just as an example comes to my mind, when a student had an ADHD case and needed more time to complete an exam, that was really considered positively. And we have cases whereby students had physical challenges and therefore they could not either type or write or, you know, take notes or follow whatever. They were given companions who would help them. So it was just a one-on-one basis, depending on what the situation is. It was handled, but they were never left out because it's part of the inclusive, you know, kind of education we offer.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Isra, Dr. Isra.
Yes, my question is for Ms. Samantha. Do you have any specific mechanisms that you think that for higher education that they can make use of them in order to validate the online teaching and learning? Not only validate the online teaching and learning, but also the assessment in terms of attainment of the learning outcomes.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So I'll take it in kind of in two parts. So first I'll tackle the assessment. So I think when it comes to assessing the efficacy of our assessments, you know, it's like an inception type of situation. But I think standard best practice still applies to online teaching. You want to do blueprinting. You want to validate. You want to test for bias. You want to pilot certain questions and see how the students are responding to them. So I think those kind of methodologies that we would use in normal assessment blueprinting against our curriculum and in terms of measuring the efficacy, those still apply to online learning. And it's just a matter of applying them to match this new creative way that we're going to assess. So yes, it's much more challenging to do these types of validation methods when you're not using all multiple choice questions. But it goes back to this idea that we have to really implement this paradigm shift, that if we are doing truly student-centered learning environments, this is the kind of assessment that they need. And in terms of actually looking at our teachers and looking how effective our staff and our faculty are, I think that the number one way to see that is in terms of the results of the achievements of our students. So when we talk about, you know, linking with industry, we talk about linking with accreditation bodies and setting standards, there are standards for learning outcomes. And so measuring to see how are our students stacking up. Of course, student feedback is super important, but I also think that in addition to touching back on what we had talked about for we're all one community and you know, really linking staff together, now is a really great opportunity to use those peer networks, but to use them in a way where it's productive in terms of, oh, it's not one professor who's judging another and I'm marking you, but using it as a feedback and using it as a tool for really open collaboration. Hey, Professor Annie, I saw that you did this exceptionally well. I'm going to take that back and use that in my classroom. Have you thought about maybe doing A, B, C, and D? Because I tried that last week and it was really effective. So I think utilizing those peer networks is a really great way that we can have assessment that is meaningful, but also productive in terms of really fostering that strong network of faculty.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Mansour?
Thank you. Next question is to Professor Allam. With regards to education quality, which is SDG 4, Do you think COVID-19 practices will require any additional expectations, in your view?
Can you repeat the question, Professor, again?
With regards to SDG 4, which is education quality.
Yes.
Do you think that, COVID-19 practices will have any additional expectations?
Expectation, you mean in terms of how we deal with it, or?
Yes. How we deal with it, how we'll handle it. What do we expect from it? What can we add? Anything in that context.
As universities, you mean?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I think one thing we could have done better, because if you remember, after the atrocities in London, the couple of terrorism attack we had, the London Metropolitan Police, they have done something remarkably good, and they said we can't wait for another one. We have to rehearse what is going to happen, and we have witnessed in London a couple of times. They have done a mock, like we call it a mock exam, because in the university we call it mock exam. They have tried to imitate if we have a crisis in the tube, what we will do, and then they have people coming, they have the emergencies, the doctors, and so on. What we didn't do at universities, although we have all these technologies and we know the e-learning and we know it will work and we know all that, but actually we haven't tried it in such a full capacity. So when these things came to us, I have noticed not only in my university, but most universities here in the UK, they found it like a big shock to the system. We suddenly receive like 20, 30 emails every day from the IT department telling us how to use Microsoft Teams, blah, 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 how to log in, how to use the camera. And I remember a couple of universities I'm aware of, some department, they start ordering laptops for staff who they don't have laptops at home and so on. So to answer your question, the lessons we learn at the universities this time from this pandemic is that we have to test whatever systems we have at the universities, because we are dealing with education and this kind of communication. And where do we test it? With the students. Maybe we can choose a 1 week during the term, and we will say to the students, this week, we're going to be teaching you completely online, remotely, with digital technologies. We want to make sure you can do it because now we have seen it. So I think if we learn that lessons, we can be much more prepared. And let me just add one thing. I don't want to take your time. Professor Hawaj said that earlier. This pandemic have brought us together, like now we are together now. But more importantly, we need to be more now understanding to the challenges faced by universities in very poor developing countries. They are not even enjoying internet. And those countries, now we can feel, many people in Africa, when this pandemic came out and started this, imagine in the UK, we lost 40,000. When I call to people in Africa and I say, yes, we lost quite a lot of number of people, and my heart are feeling all goes to these families, they will say to me, Alam, we have been losing thousands and thousands every day from malaria. You have never realized that, how serious a family member is just died. So anyway, as universities, it might be a wake-up call for us to start to really understand countries in very poor countries like in Africa, poor Latin American countries, sometimes in Asia, they don't have internet. In some universities in India, they are very good, first class, but others are not. In Africa, apart from Egypt, Tunisia, probably Morocco, Lebanon, of course, South Africa, but Sudan and other countries, they're really struggling with the internet. You go to a university campus, there's no any Wi-Fi. How are you going to teach them online? They're very smart kids, but the university have been closed for 2 years now. Sorry, almost going to 2 years. These are our kids. These are the future, because we're talking about a global phenomena here. These kids are part of us. And just one concluding remark. In 2016, the World Bank, they called us in Marseille, in France. They said, we realize, Alam, in most of the part of the world, like OCDs, kids or youngest or graduates enjoying so much of the digital benefits like technology, startup, and so on. But we noticed there is a high unemployment in the entire Middle East, including all the Middle East, and they are not benefiting from the digital revolution. Why? And then we went to Marseille, and then we sat down for 1 day, and not all of them, one of the reasons all the experts have provided, including ministers from Lebanon ICT minister was there, from Gaza, from many Egypt minister was there, many people. One of the things we agreed among many others, there's no time now, is that universities, most of them have failed in the last 10 years to produce graduates who can actually capture the benefit of the digital advancement. So I think I have taken a long, I will stop here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Professor Mansour, if you allow me, I think we have exceeded the time quite a lot. So maybe we would not, we can forward the questions to the speaker at a later stage.
All right, but let me ask if Isra, let me ask, Professor Abdullah has been struggling to join us.
Yes.
At least before I go to the conclusion, do you want to continue with the questions, Isra, or do you want to pause and we give the, because it's been almost 3 hours.
Yes, and actually I think the remaining questions has already been answered by the speakers in their informative presentations.
All
so,
right.
Yeah.
What I'll do, if you allow me, Isra, then what I'll do, I'll ask one final question to Professor Abdullah Al-Hawaj, then I will, as agreed, you will invite me to give the conclusions.
Yes.
So, Professor Abdullah, can you hear us? Professor Abdullah Al-Hawaj, can you hear us?
Dr. Mansour, 1 second, I will call him.
It was a very interesting event.
Dr. Abdullah Al-Khat.
Professor Abdullah, can you hear us?
Yes, I could hear everything, but unfortunately, I could not be seen to you.
But it's you. We can hear you. We can hear you loud and clear. I actually, what I will do, because what we did, we skipped some of the questions in the last few questions because the panelists really they made a great presentations and they answered all the questions fantastically. So you will have the opportunity to, for the last question, what I will do, I will merge the questions to you as a chairman of the board of trustees and as a founding president of the first private university in Bahrain, and as the chairperson of the Arab Private Universities Association, and also of the Gulf Universities Association, Gulf Private Universities Association. This wealth of experience, we would ask you to put it in a nutshell for us in a couple of minutes. What do you think is the role of the boards for mastering and steering strategies and looking at risk management as a result of the COVID-19? And what is, in your view, as you anticipate, is the future directions of higher education institutions, at least in the region, if not in the world? Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, of course, for very, very wealthy discussions. I really enjoyed it, and I thank everybody who was a part of it because it was great. And I must want to just mention, I think this is a test for all of us at this globe. And the only way out is to work together. The only way out is to convert the challenges we faced into new opportunities. But I must say very well, at the beginning, I talk about legislators, I talk about other things. We must be brave enough to accept real changes. As I said, the classical face-to-face education been going on for the last probably 200 or 300 years. And now this pandemic came as a shock. No, we were expecting it. Many people have expected something similar. So, but the only problem that we are still not learning from experience. we're still thinking that we should work against each other and maybe to be dominant and the other to be not. I'm saying very clearly, this is an opportunity for the whole world to work together and to know one thing. We could destroy this world by mistakes. We need to be strong enough to accept changes and be brave enough to be proactive in legislations. It's a very important. The future certainly is a blended teaching and learning, and there is no any reason to think it's going to be different. So the countries who are brave enough will be the one who will succeed. I agree 100% with everybody talks, especially Dr. Alam when he mentioned there is countries where they don't have even internet, and there is poor countries where things will not. I'm saying we need to help each other. I agree 100% that countries, and I'm very fortunate to say Bahrain is one of them, invested so much on ICT, and the infrastructure were very good, technologies were very good, and look, we've managed. Although we are a small country compared to the world, but we managed. I am saying it's a call to all academics. It's our responsibility to convince our governments that legislations should change and should give us the chance of a blended teaching and learning and working together. I can have the best professors and the best educators to my students now without having to come to my country. And I could do the opposite. I could send them the best professors in certain disciplines while they are still in Bahrain. So let's take it. This is a chance. Please, all academics, let's work together. Let's support each other. The future is very clear, and there will be a great shift, and we must be very clear and happy to support it. Let's be brave and not to be scared of changes. I take this opportunity to thank every one of you and to tell you, I am sure, inshallah, we learned from this test and the future. Let's hope it's brighter and better. Thank you very much, Dr. Mansour. Thank you very much, Dr. Isra. And I thank everybody who joined in this very, very important and very profitable. I really wish we could repeat it because I have enjoyed it and I've learned a lot from it and I've heard a lot of great ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Abdullah. Thank you very much. Dr. Isra, the next step.
Now I would like to listen from you, Professor Mansour, like a concluding remarks that we can carry away with us as higher education institutes and also as any educational service provider. What are those key points that we need to focus on to sustain our education in terms of excellence?
Thank you very much. But yes, I have a condition before I speak. If I can have all the cameras on so I can enjoy looking at you as a conclusion. If everybody puts their camera on so I can, this is a truly international gathering. I think Ahliya is very pleased with your presence. As Professor Abdullah, this has been a very enriching experience. Some of you I have already met before. Professor Alam I have met a number of times. A number of you I have met before. What I will really, from what I have heard and from what I have seen, every speaker presented key points And what I've done, I've summarized the key points from every speaker, which I thought were the focal points. And if we put them together as a conclusion to the whole forum, as a snapshot of the main or key points of all of our speakers, if you allow me, I need a few minutes to speak them out. And what I'll do, I'll go in sequence. Professor George and Dr. Anastasia really emphasized on the student learning experience and on positive behavior. They also thought that leadership and network relationship and connectivity should receive an attention, should be studied. We should consider it. Dr. Ashwin from QS Ranking, International Ranking Agency, he focused on issues of admission strategy, and he put special emphasis on the cost of education and challenges as a result of the COVID-19. He also touched on the issues of internationalization in all its aspects, and he thought that was a very, very important criteria. He also mentioned the Indian study, which is about the virtual learning, which added a lot to the research and results. He mentioned about mobility and mobility report on blended learning. And he mentioned there are 3 stages for the way forward. And I thought they were really good stages. And he said at the end, we should be revisiting the norms of validation and accreditation. It's time to revisit the norms which we are used to of validation and accreditation. Professor Abdullah Al-Hawaj, I think at the beginning and at the end, I can conclude what he said. His phrase was that there are 3 factors we should all be bothered about, which is food, air, and education, the 3 sources of life. He mentioned that there is a clear shift of paradigm, and we should be ready for it, and we should deal with it, not run away from it. He also understood there are challenges ahead, and he did talk about portability and flexibility of education, which are really coming our way regardless of what we think. And I think as a result, he said, we must accept the changes that are coming, and that as a final conclusion, he said COVID-19 brought forward collaboration and working together. These are as a result of COVID-19. Dr. Nina focused a lot on the instructor role with regards to quality assurance and its impact and expectations. She talked that we must recognize the instructor role and understand it better, the traditional one and under COVID-19. And she said we must look at the strategies of the instructor role and not just stop, and she mentioned her publications. She also mentioned about the DTE, design, teach, and engage. These are issues we should consider them when delivering online teaching and learning. And finally, she mentioned about the instructor's role in social engagement. And she mentioned 2 final strategies about raising awareness about online teaching and learning and about building confidence and involvement. Dr. Ismat from BQA in Bahrain, she talked about issues of quality assurance of qualifications and quality assuring qualification framework, which Bahrain has set to 10 levels, which they call it in Bahrain the NQF. And I was really pleased with Ismat, Dr. Ismat, when she mentioned it made me feel happy when she said we should have recognition of all forms of learning, including virtual learning, which means the BQA in Bahrain have recognized that online teaching and learning is a reality, and they will consider it in their quality assurance issues. She did talk about international trends in quality assurance and quality framework, and she said higher education institutions must, she said the word must, consider virtual learning, and it's not an option. And that coming from a quality assurance agency is really reassuring. Miss Annie from Lebanese American University, she presented the role of the leadership in universities at all levels, the leadership at the lecture faculty level, leadership at all levels. She talked about the scope of threats and uncertainty resulting from COVID-19, but she said the university there have managed them well. She mentioned some challenges. She said there is some panic. There are some adaptation and environment issues which we need to consider and put into consideration. However, she did say there were some opportunities, and these opportunities came in the form of innovation, resilience, and collaboration, and communication. It's very nice to know that COVID-19 brought all these opportunities. She did mention that there must be a change in management strategy, and that strategic agility should be the new higher education standards, and she mentioned the issue of creative coaching. Dr. Ihsan from AACSB, he did mention that AACSB is working in 103 countries, and he did say that there are challenges now, new challenges posed by COVID-19 with regards to accreditation visits. And he mentioned the global conference, which is the largest conference they hold annually in the States, and they have managed to run it with 800 participants for 800 people. He did mention the creation of a virtual platform to follow on the issues of accreditation, and the challenge of training volunteers virtually, which is posed a new challenge to them. So the issue of mobility of volunteers for accreditation, and the issues of reporting by AACSB and higher education institutions, he said that was a challenge. Samantha Miles from Knowledge E, she did appreciate that there is a paradigm shift, but it presented opportunities. She did talk about they run 3 webinars for 700 participants virtually, which is a new experience and a new way of using online connectivity. She did mention the biggest challenge that the higher education institutions face so far is really the issue of assessments, and she did call them meaningful assessments. Meaningful assessments. And she did say that engagement across leadership is a vital issue at all levels. And she mentioned we must have, she said there are 3 avoids, or 3 things to avoid. Issues about experiencing long lectures, we should look at that and not deliver long lectures, and that faculty should not be in the habit of doing it alone. It means there should be collaborations of students and get bored. And she said that could be overwhelming. Professor Allam, I think he touched on a number of things. He did mention there'll be a shift in policy directions. He mentioned about transforming leaders. It is high time to think of transforming leaders' mentality. He did mention about, I said an expression, I don't know whether he meant it or not, but it caught my attention. I think he meant it, and I really liked it. He said people, I think you said it, Professor Adnan. He said people are tired of traditional teaching and learning. And I think that's the phrase of the day. People are tired of the traditional teaching and learning, and I think that hit the nail on the head. Future generations will not accept and will not feel comfortable to sit for a 3-hour lecture, sitting on a chair. And I think that is, I like that expression. He did mention this now, the moment of truth and the moment of looking at skills and how we look at them. He did mention we should reinvent and revolutionize our education with the global dimension. And we should reconsider or consider rebranding universities. The brand of universities should be reconsidered and maybe brought to a new life. And as a final conclusion, he called it transformative education, and the issues of knowledge and smart models and data sciences, he took them as very, very serious factors. Finally, I want to say that I think it was mentioned by a number of people that COVID-19 really brought a new type of export. I think Professor Abdullah alluded to it at the end. There is the export of knowledge. So as a university, I don't have to employ a full-timer. I can employ the best faculty, the best professor from any corner of the world to teach one particular course. He doesn't have to be with me in the university. There was a mention of cooperation, and we should help the needy. That is my conclusion. I think really it's been a fantastic forum. It was very enriching. The speakers really gave a lot of knowledge and a lot of ideas. I personally benefited a lot. A lot of the things that were mentioned were very implementable. I will conclude by thanking you all. Special thanks go to Dr. Isra for putting all the efforts of inviting you all and following up. And we welcome you to Ahliya University, and we welcome your cooperation, and we hope to see you soon. That's my conclusion, Isra.
Thank you very much, Professor Mansour. You have wrapped it all up nicely and neatly. I really don't want to take more time from the speakers. It's honestly speaking, I must thank every individual one of you. It has been a very interesting topic that really took us for a longer time without even noticing the time. I must thank you very much. And I also would like to share with you the conclusion remarks that, as you are aware, that we are going to have a special issue in a journal as a journal proceeding. So if you are interested in publishing your work as part of a journal proceeding in a special issue, which will be in an ABDC ranked journal, please let us know, and I will be sending you further details about the submission deadline dates. This is the first point. And the second point I would like to mention that such sessions will be carried on. We will have a second session on 24th of June, hopefully. And if you like to participate or if you wish, if you have any speakers that may be finding an interest to contribute to make this a success, please let us know and we will be more than happy to welcome them. So I would like to thank you very much once again for your time, for your participation, for your patience with us, and thank you again.
Stay safe and good night. Stay safe and good night, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good
Bye.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Masalam. Thank you very much. And hello from Bahrain. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
هيثم الصكة من عندك؟